half the original volume. If you wanted to taste it, what you'll discover is that now we've got the vinegar with the flavor of pepper and shallots, and this reduction will carry that flavor right into our sauce. Just so our sauce isn't really chunky with shallots and peppercorns, I'm going to strain it into this bowl. Good. So now we've got egg yolks, the reduction, and a little bit of water. What I've set up here, I'm going to call a bain-marie, or a bath, Marie's bath. It's a hot water bath. The vapors coming off will heat the bowl on the bottom and give me gentle, gentle heat as I cook these egg yolks. I want to whip them constantly so that they don't get cooked. I want them to stay nice and creamy. As I whip, what you'll discover is they get really, really frothy. They will probably quadruple in volume. Keep them moving the entire time, because as they heat up, they get closer and closer to the point where they will become scrambled eggs, and that's not what we want at all. What we're going to be making here is an emulsified sauce, and there's powerful emulsifiers in egg yolks, and you'll see exactly what they can do for us in a second. Okay, you can see, very, very frothy now. Keep this moving. The water below can be just at a simmer. It doesn't have to be boiling hard. And it gives us the gentle heat that is ideal for making a hollandaise. The reason I know that this is starting to cook is not that it's frothy, but that it starts to get thick. It will get thicker and thicker, and then at one point what I will notice is that as the whip passes through this mixture, I'll be able to see the streaks of the bottom of the bowl. That tells me I've arrived. If you had a thermometer, it would be cooked to about 165 degrees. Keep it moving, and if it ever seems like it's getting away from you, it's an easy thing just to pull it off the heat and catch up, and then move it back over to the pot. Just real briefly back and forth with the whip. If you're too aggressive, if you really work hard, you'll discover your arm gets really tired. So keep a nice light touch. Just back and forth, right from your wrist here, not your entire arm and shoulder. Now it's very foamy. It's gotten much lighter in color. You should be able to notice that as well. It's just starting to hold a little bit of a track as the whip passes through there. And by that I mean it's starting to get thicker. Incrementally more and more thick. I would say start to finish, this is probably going to take you 3 minutes. And I don't know if you noticed, but we just saw the bottom of the bowl beginning to show up. So I don't need any more heat. I'm going to turn this off. And I'm going to take my towel and put it over this so that the heat is not quite so aggressive. Okay, you can see the bottom of the bowl. That's exactly as I want it. What I have here, and I'm going to put it up front so it's a little easier to see, is clarified butter that's hot. Not so hot that it will continue to cook these eggs, but let's say about 150 degrees. And we're going to make an emulsion. Real briefly, an emulsion is when you take two things that don't like to mix and you mix them together. There's two phases of an emulsion. One is a continuous phase and the other is dispersed. So I'm dispersing fat into the continuous phase that is this egg yolk mixture, all right? And when you start with the hollandaise, when you start to establish an emulsion, you want to add the oil very, very slowly, or the clarified butter. So just drop by drop while you whip. And the clue that your emulsion is beginning to form is that right out of the chute, this will start to thicken. I can see it happening already. Don't add the oil or the butter very fast at all until you see this beginning to thicken. And then you can be a little more cavalier and add it slightly more quickly. For each of those egg yolks, I'm going to add about 2 ounces of clarified butter, but at no point should this mixture look anything but creamy. So if it starts looking oily, you're probably adding your butter too quickly. Keep it creamy by mixing it. About 2 ounces per yolk is right, but more than that, any less, and you may discover that your hollandaise tastes dry or it coats your mouth. The egg yolk coats your mouth too completely. If you taste that, it's an indication that you probably need a little bit more butter. So here's the third introduction of 2 ounces. It's a very light sauce. Now, as long as I'm adding butter, I'm whipping. But if I stop adding butter, I should stop whipping. I don't want to whip the air that I've worked so hard to put in there out. So while you're adding butter, you should be whipping. And when you're done adding butter, you can stop whipping. All right, so there's our hollandaise right there. It's got this wonderful sensual texture. It still needs to be seasoned. It would be very difficult to put pepper in here and get the flavor because it's so thick. So I like to use Tabasco, just a couple of drops. If you were to taste it, what you would discover is that it tastes of butter. I can taste the reduction that went in there earlier. Obviously, I can taste the Tabasco. It needs salt. And in a sauce like this, that's this thick, sometimes it's difficult for salt to dissolve. So when I add salt, I oftentimes add a little bit of liquid at the same time to help that salt begin to dissolve. The sauce needs some lemon anyway, so I'm using lemon here. What the lemon is doing is cutting through the richness of so much butter and so much egg yolk. Could still use a little bit more salt. And I'll add some more lemon juice. If it's already too tart and you can't add more lemon juice, just a little bit of water can be added as well to help that dissolve. Recognize that it'll start to become thin if you add too much water. All right, there's our hollandaise done. Now, what I will tell you is that this sauce is a little bit problematic in that it has butter in it. So if it gets cold, the butter will congeal, the sauce will break into eggs and butter. If it gets too warm, the eggs will turn into scrambled eggs and the sauce will break into scrambled eggs and butter. So you need to keep it warm but not hot. What I'm going to do is take this pan, cool this water off slightly, and then set it aside for the time being. If you need to keep it for a long time, a thermos is a great way to go. Now we need to poach some eggs. Let me move this over, and we'll talk about poaching eggs real briefly. Beautiful. So I've got a sautoir. It's got water deep enough to cover an egg. Usually when you poach, just the same way when you poach fish, you add a little bit of wine or vinegar or lemon juice. I'm going to add a little bit of acid. And what that does is it changes the pH and helps protein to coagulate more quickly. I don't want my eggs to be colored, and so I'm going to use a distilled vinegar. And I'm going to add just a tablespoon or two per quart of liquid. And if you're curious to see what that tastes like, you should be able to just barely taste the acidity. Okay, we'll set that aside. Temperature is important here. If you'll recall, we poach at about 160 degrees. And there's some clues. When you see steam coming off the top, you're at about 160 degrees. But there's one thing in particular that I like to see. I like to see a few bubbles on the bottom of the pan. Those bubbles will lift the egg up and keep it from the bottom. And so I'm going to wait until I see that happening, although it's just beginning right here. I'm going to take an egg and crack it into a coffee cup. And the nice thing about that coffee cup is that it gives me a little handle to hold on to when I lower this egg into the liquid. You're going to need a plate with a towel to accept your eggs when they're done, and you're going to need a spoon or a skimmer like this that is perforated so that you can lift the egg out and drain the excess moisture off. While we're waiting for that to come up to temperature, I'm going to get things set up here. I've got some English muffins that are toasted with a little bit of ham on the top that has been warmed. I'm going to move everything out of the way. And I think we're just about at a point where we can start to poach. All right. Take this and lower it gently into the water. You don't want to disturb the white too much. I like to work close to the edge of the pan where I see some bubbles on the bottom and allow some of the hot water to flow in. And then gently tip this egg out against the side of the pan. That will kind of contain it. And bring the white up and over the top. Take a look at this egg. It is firm, but the yolk is still soft. I can take it out and manipulate it. I'm going to slide it onto a towel. Here's the second that I put in, and I'm going to take that out as well.